Today we're going to have a camera shootout. We've got the Nikon ZFC with its fantastic retro looks going up against the Sony RX10 Mark IV, a camera with a superb Zeiss lens. This was taken by one of those great cameras, and this was taken by the other one. Can you tell the difference? I'll show you a whole load of sample images straight off the cameras right the way through the film, and stick around to the end because I'll show you my finished edits. The Nikon ZFC. I think this is a cracking camera and incredible value for money. The retro looks alone are worth every penny. But it comes with this kit lens, this 16 to 50 kit lens. And just how good is this lens? Well, I pitted it up against a Nikon Z6 Mark II, but that camera was 3 times the amount of money as this camera here. Shortly after that, I pitted it up against a Fuji XH1, which cost twice as much as this camera. So I thought it was about time that I pitted the Nikon ZFC against the camera more closely positioned to it in the market. Well, today I'm meeting Paul, and Paul is bringing his Sony RX10 Mark IV, a camera much closer to the price bracket of this Nikon ZFC. I think the Sony is maybe £200 more, but pretty close. The Sony's a bridge camera, hasn't got interchangeable lenses. This we're reviewing with the kit lens that you can get with it. So the Sony with its Zeiss lens versus Nikon, the new Nikon. I really rate this camera. I think it's going to do pretty well. Paul's arrived, he's here, and he's bought the Sony. Paul, we're at
Enville Church.
We're at Enville Church, which is a 12th century church. Paul's bought his Manfrotto travelling tripod. But I've bought this little thing, and it's just like a £20 tripod, because there is absolutely no weight in this Nikon. You can buy the cheapest, nastiest tripod in the world, and it will still support the Nikon because there's absolutely no weight in it. Oh, good luck carrying your Manfrotto, Paul.
It's not that heavy.
I've got a 16 to 50, which on APS is
24 to 75.
24 to 75, yeah, because it's half as much again, isn't it? So I'm on a 24 to 75. Of course, Paul's got the Sony, and the big thing that he's got in his armour is it's a 600 mm.
24 to 600.
A 24
35 Milton.
to 600. That is just bonkers. If you want to see a review of that camera, by the way, I'll leave a link in the description. It is absolutely an amazing camera. But how's it going to fare against this Nikon? We'll just use the same focal range that the Nikon has got, and maybe we'll just stick a 600 in occasionally to just see what you can get. What are you expecting? Are you expecting the Sony to outperform the Nikon?
I don't think there'll be much between them, to be honest. I wouldn't know which way it's going to go.
I mean, what about lenses?
Theoretically, the Nikon ought to be better.
Because it's newer?
And because it's a bigger sensor.
Ah, yeah. Of course, that's not an APS sensor, is it?
No.
It's a 1-inch sensor.
It's a 1-inch sensor, yeah.
Okay. Which is why you've got the 600mm.
Exactly.
Okay. But it is a Zeiss lens.
Exactly.
And not just any old Zeiss lens.
No, it's a very, very good lens. I'm surprised by it, to be honest. I'm amazed by it, to be honest. It is excellent.
But Nikon do make quite good lenses too.
Exactly. As I know.
Yeah. And what's that go down to? What are you know? What's your widest aperture?
2.4, where soon drops to 2.8 at the widest end.
You're 2.4, and I'm stuck here with a 3.5 at the widest end and 6.3. So you've got some big advantage with the f-stop. However, I would say that the ISO on the Nikons is probably the best on the market in terms of low light capability.
Yeah, I agree. It's good. I agree. I think that will be what it gains over the Sony, is the fact that you'll be able to use high ISO, which I can use, but it isn't quite so good.
Oh, bring it on. We've come down to the bottom part of the church, and Paul's taken this picture 100 times. It's not far from where we live. But you know, if you've seen the videos with Paul, he likes to use a viewfinder, and pretty much I don't think I've ever seen him use the screen to take a picture. And you know, these cameras are just set up for it, with this touch screen and taking pictures. So do you know what, Paul, if you just like to just pop your camera on there for a second.
Right.
Just tap on it where you want to take it. Take a couple. It's as easy as that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Really easy.
it is easy. Oh, could you be convinced with the AF that this?
It's been very useful in certain circumstances, yes.
Go on, Paul, get in there. And just to prove a point, he quickly sets the Sony up with the touchscreen to take pictures. So, what are the pictures like from the Sony and the Nikon on this flat grey day? Let's have a little look. Let's pop it on the back of the screen. Oh boy, that lens on the Sony, that Zeiss lens, is super sharp. Look at the clarity of that. Unbelievable. You can even see the hairs stuck on it, which have blown on there from the sheep in the next field. Unbelievable. Let's have a look at another one. And there's a shot of one of the gravestones, and you can see how the acid rain has burnt away the sandstone, the local sandstone, and the type has gone all kind of strange there. And look at that, the Sony, that Zeiss lens has it just really, the clarity of it is absolutely stunning, isn't it? But what about the Nikon? We redid this picture on the Nikon. Is it going to be as good? Is it going to be not as good? Well, here it is. Boom! What do you think? It's pretty good, isn't it? It's pretty darn good. It's not a Zeiss lens. I don't think it's quite as crisp, but you know, there's no sharpener on this. I think maybe if you pop a little bit of a sharpener on in post. I have to say, the first thing that stands out to me yet again is the Nikon's colour. It just handles colour in so much more of a natural way, I think, than Fuji's or Sony's. I just think Nikon's colour is incredible. But you know, first impressions, I think this is pretty good. And let's put them just quickly both up together. Well, there's not much to pick between these two cameras. Paul was right. Having a look at that, they're both nice and sharp. I think the Zeiss lens is very slightly sharper, but there is one thing I want to pick up. I want you to look at the gravestones in the background. Look over here, and let's pull some metadata up. There we go. That's metering data. Now, look at the Sony. The Sony is pin sharp, look, on the left hand side, and you can see all those gravestones going back. They're not really falling out of focus, and yet it's on f2.5. It's wide open. You'd expect, even though this is quite a wide shot, to be seeing those falling out. The Nikon, look, is on f5, and you'd expect them to be sharper than the f2.5 of the Sony, but they're actually starting to go out of focus. There's some differential focus there, and that's the chip size. That's the difference between the chip size being APS on the Nikon, the larger APS, and the 1-inch on the Sony. It's keeping everything sharp, the Sony is, despite being on f2.5. And we're back to the sheep. Some of their wool has caught on the barbed wire. This is the Nikon, and let's have a look at the Sony. Now the Sony with its small sensor struggling to throw that grass out of focus in the background, isn't it? But let's give the Sony a chance to show off. Bang, with its 600mm lens. What a zoom. Now we've just come to take some pictures close up on this bush here, but look, here's the Sony, and look how close he is to the actual what he's photographing. It gets incredibly close. I can't get anywhere near where he was photographing from. Boom, and there's the Sony. It's a nice picture, but here's the thing. You know how close he was with the lens getting that picture. He took one shot. He literally locked onto that with one shot with that macro, and just boom, it was done. The Nikon, on the other hand, well, I must have taken 12 pictures trying to get a sharp one. It did not like being that close. It was not at all happy doing work that close in. generally, give me the Sony when it comes to taking close-up stuff like that, because that ZFC, it clearly, that wasn't what it was happy doing. Now, Paul's polished his car today. Look at this, he's polished his car and we're in a nice place. Let's take a picture of it. Now, golden rule, okay, there are obvious exceptions, but the golden rule when you're taking pictures of cars is use the longest lens that you have available. Although if Paul uses the 600mm, he might be in the next village. But use the longest. Don't ever do it on a wide angle. It might seem like a good idea, but actually it always looks pretty rubbish. It pulls the panels out of proportion and just doesn't look good. If you can put the headlights on the car, the pictures always look better. Every car magazine you'll see will always have the headlights on, even on a sunny day. And also the big rule is get as low as you can. If you can get your camera on the floor, the car will look better. The higher you are, the worse it's going to look from the car's point of view. So long lens, camera position as low as possible. So we start off this time with the picture from the Nikon. The ZFC has done a great job here, and I know I'm banging on about it, but look at the colour rendition from the Nikon. It really is, I haven't manipulated this is as it comes off the camera. It's just superb. As you can see, I've got low, super low. I've got the camera on the ground. I've got the maximum zoom that this little kit lens is giving me. Other than the fact that it's a really grey day and we haven't got a nice sky behind it, I'm really pleased with this. So let's have a look at the Sony. Now Paul's gone for a slightly higher angle than me. He didn't want to get his knees wet on the floor, so he's gone to sort of knee level, whereas I was on right on the tarmac. And what that's done is brought those trees behind into play, which I do actually quite like. It was a good choice, Paul. It's taken the whole exposure down, but as you can see, it's not as warm a picture as the Nikon, but I like it. It's crystal sharp, isn't it? I prefer this picture, probably, if I'm being honest. And we put them up side by side, identical pictures, and it's pretty clear that the Sony above here is a sharper picture. You can just see a little bit sort of a crisper image, can't you? It's such a great lens, that Sony lens. I mean, it is real quality Zeiss optics. It isn't some sort of inferior product that they've bought to have put in. It's the real deal. Fantastic lens. I mean, that sensor is 1 inch compared to the APS. Really, they shouldn't be comparable, and the Zeiss has just got it. Let's just zoom in a little bit. Now, this is a 400% enlargement, and yes, I don't think there's much between it. Paul was standing, well, he was either standing slightly closer or he zoomed in slightly more than I did, which is the difference in the magnification here, but they are both 400% enlargement, so this is comparing like with like, and there isn't much between it. I mean, really, it's very, very difficult. I suppose the Zeiss is looking very, very slightly sharp. I'm not sure. I mean, what do you think? It's really, there's a gnat's whisker between these two cameras in terms of what you're getting in the end result. He's obviously praying for inspiration on this picture. But what he was actually doing was a shot of the alloy, and here's Paul's picture with the Sony with that Zeiss lens of the alloy wheel. And we've done this because high contrast usually shows the sharpness of a lens. And look at the chrome, the polished chrome around the outside of that Audi sign, nice and crystal clear. Let's have a look at the Nikon. Yeah, no, that's not as sharp, is it? That really is showing the difference between those two lenses. The Sony's a big camera. It's a bulky camera. You wouldn't want to carry it around, but there's no denying that lens is bitingly sharp. And for a 1 inch sensor, the sensor's not as big as the Nikon. It shouldn't be outperforming it, I wouldn't have thought, but that is astonishing. And I just wanted to put into context that extra something, that 600mm on the Sony is giving you. Because it's a small sized sensor, the magnification of the lens is huge. And so here's a shot with the Nikon, a little scene at the churchyard here, and can you see that tree in the distance over there, that one on the top of the next hill along? Well, let's get on the Sony and let's zoom in 600mm. Wow, that really shouldn't be possible, should it? I mean, that is a long way away, and look at the clarity of that, you know, from such a small lens, albeit much bigger than the Nikon. I mean, that's what I think this is coming down to. The Sony gives you that crisp lens, it gives you that massive magnification, but it's much bulkier. If you were traveling, I think I'd want the Nikon because it's so light and small. So do you think it's absolutely obvious when we're taking pictures, certainly at the wide end? Do you think it's obvious which camera is which? I mean, here's a wide picture of the village high street. Which picture is which? Which one is the Zeiss lens and which one is the Nikon ZFC? It's not so easy, is it? And don't forget, one of these cameras was a heavy, bulky thing on my shoulder, even though it was a bridge camera. The other was as light as a feather. I go as far as to say the Nikon would actually fit in with whatever you're doing. So your vacation, your walk, your leisure pursuit would be the main thing, and having your camera with you would be secondary. Whereas the Sony is so big and heavy, it would have to be a photographic expedition. I'd say you need to be taking pictures first and foremost. Now let's head inside and take a picture in the dark. This was only lit by the lights on the Christmas tree. We've got no external lighting on this, and so this is the Sony, and as you can see, the small sensor, it seems to struggle a little bit. It's quite contrasty. There isn't too much detail in the shadows. Let's have a look at the Nikon. Oh yeah, no, that's very different. Obviously the slightly larger sensor, but it's also the way Nikon is able to handle higher ISOs, and it just does a much better job in lower light. This is Nikon all day long for me. If you want low light capability, it's a clear winner. And just to add insult to injury, we took an even trickier shot. We took all the lights out in the room, and we just had light coming from underneath this window blind, backlighting, heavy backlighting, to see how they would go on. The Sony look is struggling. It's really struggling to put any detail into the foreground objects there. It really doesn't like the light being so heavy at the back. But the Nikon, well, its auto mode is quite happy to have a tricky situation like that. It's disregarded that bright light behind it. Its matrix metering on program has really locked on to those objects that are in the shadow, and done a good exposure. A much better job there in low light. Nikon, the clear low light winner for me. And our final picture is one by Paul, and it's of yours truly, and we just wanted to see how it picked up the eye on the eye detection, and the Nikon really has locked onto the eye. And that's one thing we both noticed, that it was so much better at tracking eyes, picking up eyes, tracking eyes, moving around with them both on video and on stills. It really did in eye mode in the focus lock onto the eye, and also it's done a better job with the exposure. The colour I talked about before, it's much better at colour rendition, but it's just captured more tones in the skin. Look, there's some bleaching out on the Sony there. It just generally looks more contrasty, but I suppose that's the smaller size sensor.
It's hard to say which is the better camera. They're both excellent cameras.
I'd go as far as to say that what we're actually looking at here is two cameras in the same price range. The Sony's about 200 quid more. They're in the same price range, but they're for very different markets. The Sony is made maybe for people that want that kind of magnification. You're into aviation, it's absolutely ideal for you. It's essential for you to be able to get, you know, pictures of planes and helicopters, things that are a long way away. You couldn't do that with the Nikon. No. However, I'm going to say to you, if you were on a walking holiday in Cornwall, which of those would you rather have on your shoulder?
The Nikon is lighter, but I'd miss the zoom range on the Sony.
It'd be too much.
It's always there when you want it.
It'd be too much. You wouldn't trade the lightness of the Nikon for the lens on the Sony.
No, I wouldn't.
Now that's interesting. I did think Paul might be swayed by the Nikon there, but he couldn't give up that 600mm lens on the Sony, and I can see why. If you're into aviation or nature or anything that needs that kind of zoom, it's going to be too big to miss. But for me, I like cameras like this for travel and for just grabbing pictures. And for me, the lightness of the Nikon, not to mention its fantastic retro looks, are just too good to miss. I would take the Nikon every time, even though that Zeiss lens is slightly sharper. For me, the practicality of an ultralight camera is just too much of a thing to give up. Now at the start of the video I said I would show some of the images from the day, didn't I, at the end, my edits, and these are my edits. This is the picture of the car, and put a little angle on it there to get something moving. As you can see, I'm zoomed right the way in. I'm actually on the floor to get that tree coming in, and I've had to add some sky. I'm sorry guys, but it was such a flat grey day. There was absolutely no action at all. There was no way that you were going to be able to photograph a car in those conditions without some post production. So all of these pictures are going to have an extensive amount of post on to get anything out of them. Here's a church scene from the bottom of the churchyard that we took when Paul was having a go at using the screen to take pictures, which he likes the viewfinder. And the Tudor cottages in the middle of Kimber High Street, and I love those little tiny windows, people and doors. Look, people must have been so small in the Tudor days. Next up, a gravestone that had been eaten away by the acid rain and left all that text sort of protruding out of the stone, of the sandstone, which I found really quite intriguing. And finally, the tower at Enval Church itself. And we had hoped to go in and test these cameras in there with the low light, but unfortunately, because of the restrictions, because of the virus, it was locked. We couldn't go in. So we will go back with some cameras and test them in there and show you what it's like some other time. If you'd like to see my full review on the Nikon ZFC, then click on this link here. And if you'd like to see me pitted up against a Fuji X-H1, then check out this link here.